Troubling number of realistic artificially generated images emerged following the Bondi terror attack, and they included a manipulated video of New South Wales Premier Chris Minns and images of supposed heroes who turned out to be entirely fabricated. Well, for more, joining us live is Hammond Pearce, Senior Lecturer at the University of New South Wales' School of Computer Science and Engineering. Thank you so much for joining us. We already hear so much misinformation, don't we? And we're seeing it more, of course, with AI. So what's happening here and how do we spot what is fake and what is not?
It's really difficult to tell immediately what is and what isn't real online, particularly when it comes to things like text, which can be, quite short. Honestly, one of the biggest things that we have in our favor right now when approaching content that might be fake online is around the length of the content. If it's a video, it's very difficult still for AI to fake that realistically, which is what we saw with Min's. And in the case of pictures, which need to be, quite high fidelity, where we also saw fake content with the survivor of the October 7 attacks, the human rights lawyer, that was also faked, right? There was this fake image of him wearing the, with this fake makeup artist. And again, in that case, we were able to look at the background details of the images and see that, it didn't make any sense, right? When it comes to text, it can become quite tricky because, something like the length of a tweet, very short, is difficult to tell if that's been AI generated or not. So you need to approach that with sort of like, who is the messenger? What are they trying to persuade me? Why are they trying to persuade me of that?
Are we seeing more and more of phone calls, for example? When you pick up the phone, it's a no caller ID, and then you think, okay, they're trying to grab your voice to then potentially use that for calling your son or, relative or what have you. What's going to happen here? Because that's quite scary as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it's extremely scary. One of the things that we've discovered in our own research at the University of New South Wales is just how easy it is for various attackers to do kinds of, this sort of nefarious stuff with AI. We ran a competition where we got students to build misinformation machines for the purposes of understanding them. And even the students themselves were shocked at just how straightforward it was to produce content that wasn't real. We had students observing that, hey, it's actually way easier to produce fake content than it is to produce real content. So it is scary. And things like, as you've said, audio captures to clone voice, that is something that we've witnessed as well. And this is things you can do at home with consumer hardware. So it is actually a very real concern. And people do need to start thinking about what they're going to do with regards to how they might approach that. A lot of families are already coming up with code words, which sounds ridiculous, but it's actually true. You might say, hey mum, if I call and I ask for money, I'll always use this word. If I don't use this word, you're being scammed, right? So things like that is actually worth thinking about even in your own families.
And Hammond, what about elections? I mean, we've heard over the years that they can be rigged. We see a lot of, countries still using the pen and paper. What's going to happen here?
So cybersecurity around elections has heaps of concerns. Actually, pen and paper is usually considered a good thing because at least that means that the physical action of voting is usually a bit more difficult to compromise. But certainly online chatter around elections, that's a huge thing that people are already targeting. We're starting to see huge amounts of content around election season. We're seeing it in Australia, we're seeing it in America, all over the world. For instance, in the last election, there was the faked video of Peter Dutton speaking Mandarin, right? That wasn't real, and that circulated for a while. So it is a very real thing that people online are going to be producing this content to try and deceive you, to try and confuse you so that you don't know what's real and so that you then become more misinformed and more susceptible to being persuaded to vote a different way.
Is there an upside to this? When we look at phones, prior to that, we probably knew everybody's phone numbers. Now, let's face it, perhaps we don't know everybody's phone numbers because we don't have to. So is our brain going to potentially change to look out for things as you've been talking about? Is that going to be a positive for part of our brain?
Look, that's a really difficult question to answer. I think there is a positive in that, maybe we'll start to think very critically about the information that we'll see online. I think there is, for a number of years, we've been a little bit maybe too trusting of the kinds of content that we consume online, and maybe there will be a pushback to being, actually, I don't know if this is going to be real. I need to talk to trusted people, even talk to them in person to make sure that I know that that what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing is actually real, because there will be more and more fake content that's coming to you via social media.
Well, that's right, because you've got your two-factor authentication, for example, which is quite a secure thing. But yes, as we get into AI and speaking to people and it becoming more and more online, it's going to be difficult. And we certainly know, you look at your emails and they look very convincing, don't they? Some of those,
They do.
bad actors.
Yes, they do. And this actually even goes back to things like the Qantas data breach and other data breaches that happen in Australia, right? Criminals will use that information. They'll use it to build profiles of you, and then they will use the latest technologies like AI to customize scams and send them to you. They can do that now. So you don't need to be worried maybe as much about, a Nigerian prince emailing you and asking you to send him money, right? It might now be actually, hey, I'm your neighbor, or I'm your son, I'm your mum. I've got their actual names. I've got their travel itinerary because I've taken it from Facebook, and I can get those details because I can collect all of this data about you over the sort of leakages that we've seen from large companies, and just the fact that we are, as a society, a bit too trusting about the amount of stuff that we put online. So all of that can be aggregated, and it can be aggregated quickly by AI, which means criminals can do that too and use it to craft really persuasive, really believable scams.
And we just had a doctor on from the AMA, and we're talking about the health app and the dangers with that, with ChatGPT. And that's, and time for another segment perhaps, because we're running out of time. But yes, that whole ChatGPT, putting your information into something that is apparently safe, but then, as we've been talking about, big companies get hacked.
Yes, they do. They do. And, this is something that I've talked about previously, and so have many other people, which is that, there's a lot of us that feel that privacy law really needs to be strengthened quite extensively in Australia, so that companies know there's a bit more of an incentive to be responsible stewards of the data that we give them, because we give it to them in confidence that they'll be responsible with it. And it's very, very frustrating every time there's one of these big data breaches, and it seems that they are being very irresponsible with how they secure everything about us.
It's hard to trust, isn't it? But how do we live our lives, not, being mindful of that, but then just, also trying to enjoy life?
Yeah, it's challenging, right? It's very challenging, particularly when it's things like our national carrier, right? I fly places, I fly Qantas. Of course, I have to give them my information to travel. So, it gets very, very frustrating when what happens is we give them this details, and then suddenly, our phone numbers and our frequent flyer numbers are being leaked all over the place. And we're like, well, but I had to give you this information so that I could participate in flying in society. And it's the same thing with the health stuff, right? If you want the benefits of whatever these companies are offering you, you're going to give them that data. And then that means that those companies, they have a responsibility for that data, but also, they're going to try and get the value out of it as well.
Yeah, we're running out of choices though, aren't we? I mean, we have to do it in a lot of ways,
Yes.
Yeah. But anyway, great conversation. Thank you so much.
Cheers. Thank you so much for having me.